give everyone just literally a minute or so. Just as we're waiting, I think you all have met now, sort of virtually. So I was just wondering in the chat, if you wouldn't mind, and just to let you know, this isn't visible on Facebook, if you wouldn't mind just putting in the chat what has been the most interesting or the most powerful thing that you have discovered or thought about this week as a result of the sessions. So what has been your biggest takeaway this week so far? Imperfect actions, yes. It's my favourite too. And feelings as data. Yeah, that's such a good one. I don't know whether any of you have discovered Clubhouse yet, but I was talking on Clubhouse today about emotions as data. It's interesting. Both of the above, great. Now, if I could just ask you to make sure that your microphones are switched off, and just to make sure that it just makes the sound a bit easier. That's great. Make sure we've got. Okay, so let's make a start. Brilliant. Accepting imperfections. Yes. Great one. Very good. Great. Okay, so today we're on day 4 already. It's going so quickly this week. It's just whizzing by. And we're moving on to a topic that I think everybody at some point, I think, can relate to this. And it's all about courageous communication. And the reason why I chose this is because a lot of people that I come across talk to me about this. And they say things like they're worried about having obviously the big difficult conversation, so obviously having to give somebody bad news, but it also can be the everyday things, giving feedback that's maybe difficult to give. It could be that someone doesn't like confronting people, or that they don't want to look arrogant by giving people advice or by pointing out something. So it can be a mix of things, and today I'm going to touch a bit on those generally, but just as a bit of a, not an opt-out, but just to say that to really look into this, you'd need to look at the specific time and really what the issue is behind that. So it's a very general overview today for this. So at the end during the discussion, we can of course look at some specific examples if you'd like to. Okay, I'd just like to start with, again, another little quote from Amanda Gorman, the poet that I referenced earlier in the week, because one of the lines in her poem a couple of weeks ago really resonated with me. And she said that during this period, and I think she was talking about really 2020 in the United States, she said, "We've learned that quiet is not always peace." And let me just say that again. We've learned that quiet is not always peace. And I thought this was a very interesting idea, that noise and conflict and debate and lively, messy discussion can actually be positive. And when we have an absence of that, we realise that actually that doesn't necessarily mean that we've got peace, that we've got a situation that is calm and positive. So I'd just like to challenge our idea, because I think sometimes we can think that when things are calm, when everything is looking good on the surface, that's necessarily a good thing all the time. Now, obviously it can be, but let's not be afraid of having ripples on the surface, of having messy debate, of having discussions that are difficult. In fact, I would suggest even let's search them out. Let's actually lean into those and see where that takes us. Because quite often what can happen, what we discover with coaching is quite often the very thing that we find the most difficult is the thing that we need to do more of. Unfortunately, that's kind of life. But if having difficult conversations is something that for you is difficult, then focusing on that is probably the next thing that you really need to do. And I'd just like to just think about the context that we have at the moment, because I think obviously 2020, 2021 is a very different kind of era for everybody. And I think what's been interesting about the pandemic, or one of the things that's been interesting, is I've noticed, and this is just my opinion, that there's been a real reduction in public debate. And I think this is very often the case in times of real crisis, in big crisis. And it's been very interesting to see how disagreement and debate has become less visible. We certainly see this, I would say, in the French press. I think it's a fair reflection to say that the French press has not had the usual level of debate. In usual times, the French press is very lively with a lot of debate, but we can really see an absence of that. Now, I'm not saying that there is censorship, I'm not saying that at all, but I think given that we're in a time of crisis, I think there is, or there can be, this feeling that debate is more difficult, that it's almost not loyal. It's disloyal to disagree with the decision that is supposed to be good for everybody. It's almost part of this wartime discourse in a way that that is maybe a little bit restrictive. And this got me thinking because, well, as well as having concerns about, maybe you could even have concerns about democracy. I don't want to get too political. But I think what it does, it reduces creativity. And it introduces this idea that to be loyal means to be in consensus, to agree. And I think that this can be a big problem, because being loyal is actually, in my way of thinking, being loyal is having the vision and the purpose in mind, being aligned with that. But how you get there, then surely we can disagree on that. So I would say that this is something that we're seeing in real time at the moment, and I think it's fascinating to see this playing out, and maybe we can learn from that and use that when we're thinking about difficult conversations. So as leaders, the lessons that can be learnt that I would suggest are, firstly, that having differing opinions, having debate and even conflict, as long as it's in a safe environment, does not mean necessarily that we've lost a common vision and a common purpose. So this means that maybe we can think again about welcoming debate, welcoming differing opinions, and within that safe environment, which represents for me courageous communication. Now, I hope I haven't confused everybody with that. But basically, what I would like to get the message across is that being courageous in your communication means truly allowing people to disagree with you. And to be able to move that, to use that to move forward. Because if you are aligned in your values, if you are aligned in your purpose, then the debate can only move you all forward. It might take a little bit more time, but it's very likely that the end result will probably be better. Now, I'll be interested at the end to see what you think about that and whether it works, whether it can work really in practice in your field. And I also understand that this may not always be the case, but as a general rule, let's have a think about that. So in your workbook that I've given you, I've asked you to list down the main areas of difficulty that we have with communication, and especially with a team. So today we're really thinking about our teams. I would think that there are many difficulties, but just three general ideas. I would say the first one are just simple misunderstandings. So by that, it could be simply that people haven't understood a task, there hasn't been enough communication about what's required, the expectations are not clear, the objectives, the goals, that kind of thing. Now, we know that generally, even when people have been working remotely, in fact, many leaders have managed to do that really very well. So generally, that seems to be an area that, although can be difficult, most people are fairly confident to sort that out and to put that in place. My second thought on this was really that sometimes when we want to improve communication, we think, let's put a process in place. Let's put a system in place. And This can work very well, but sometimes we forget then that actually the communication still needs to happen. We still need to check that that is what is actually happening. And I'm going to give you an education example that I think most teachers and parents can relate to, and that is the school report. So the school report, as you know, is written generally by the teachers, and it's sent home to the parents either digitally or on paper, however. Now, the idea is, of course, that this is a communication between school, parents and children. But I wonder how much real communication would we say actually happens in that process? And if that's the aim, if communication is the aim, we have the system in place, we've ticked the box, okay, we've done the communication. But is that really the kind of communication that we want? I mean, as a teacher, I would say that quite often the people I really wanted to speak to, this wasn't going to be the best way to reach them and to communicate with them. So this is just to give an example that when we put systems in place with the best intentions, sometimes we need to just look again and check that they are actually achieving our goals of communication. Thirdly, which won't surprise you, is obviously individual relationships. So what's very interesting is quite often at this time of year, or sort of December, January time, there are many studies that come out, articles all about the number one qualities, for example, that leaders need to have in this coming year. And this year I saw a couple of articles, I keep an eye out for them, and a couple of them mentioned this. And they said that the number one quality most wanted by employees was empathy. And I thought this was very interesting because it's something that I've seen a couple of times, well, more than a couple of times, when I have done 360-degree evaluations with clients. And this is when we ask people who work with the client to give their advice essentially to the client. And empathy is often one that can be really praised. So they'll say, yes, this person shows great empathy, and sometimes it can be something I think that this person could show more empathy. But that word empathy comes up again and again, and obviously that is central to communication. So I think that's just something to keep in mind. So just looking at some ideas of what we can do about these things. Now, this is a very quick tour, and I'd just like to say again that it very much depends on your situation, and so these are general ideas. The first one, simple misunderstandings. Well, obviously, simply talking, making sure that you get enough conversation to really talk about things, and also listening, and we're going to come back to that. Clarifying by asking questions. And I think this can be very helpful, and sometimes we forget to do it. So clarify by checking. And this is what coaches do all the time. Is that what you mean? Can you say that again? Have I understood correctly? And I think that kind of way of coaching, using that with your team, can also help the other person clarify what they mean if it's not clear. But also, essentially, it helps you to be absolutely sure that you've understood and not made assumptions, which is something we all do. I think the third thing to avoid simple misunderstandings is to act quickly and to lean into those difficult conversations when things do go wrong, not to leave things festering and to think, oh, well, we'll just pass over that one, leave it for another day, putting it off, knowing that actually something needs to be done. Lots of people would say also things like sending emails can lead to misunderstandings. That's something that I think, you as individuals, you'd need to look at to see where the misunderstandings, where if they do occur, where do they occur, and how can you rectify that. Second one, looking at systems. So I think it's just to keep in mind that systems in themselves don't replace communication in all its glory. And we might need to add in extra things. We need to look where the safety nets are, particularly when we're working with lots of diverse clients, customers, people that we are serving. I think using systems can be very helpful. For example, if you want feedback on a document, sending it round and getting comments can work very, very well, of course. But sometimes we need to also think about what kind of communication do we need for a certain activity, and that might seem quite an easy thing. But actually, what often happens, or what I see happening a lot, is that meetings, for example, can end up being very much for the day-to-day running. What's the plan? What are we doing tomorrow? What are we doing the next day? And it can be used for planning. And what we perhaps don't use meetings as much for is for the more collaborative, the messy discussion. So the meetings about where we're thinking about the vision of the future, where are we going, what are the priorities, who might have different ideas. So let's keep an audit in our minds of what kind of communication is required for this particular activity. And I think that can be very interesting. And if you are interested in that, I talked quite a lot about that in a podcast a couple of weeks ago. So let me know if you'd like a copy of that. Talking about individual relationships, so all of the above, everything that we've just talked about, and just to keep in mind the obvious, that your people are your best resource. They absolutely are. And whatever you're doing, the people you are working with are your best resource. So the connection that you make with them is gold dust. That's where the value is. So if keeping that at the centre of everything that you do, every meeting that you hold, how are you going to improve that connection? Everything, that must be absolutely central. Now, for that, obviously, listening skills are something that come up on the agenda very frequently. And for those of you who are in teaching, I think you will find this interesting. The Harvard Business Review has just written an article about improving listening, and they suggested having listening circles where people sit round in their meeting, and one by one, everybody gets a chance to talk, and everyone else must not interrupt. Now, those of you who are teachers will know, well, that sounds exactly like circle time that we have been doing for absolutely years in a primary classroom. So this idea is a very simple one, but it's such an important one, giving people the space to say what they want to say without being interrupted. Now, obviously with that, you need ground rules in place. It needs to be a safe place. There needs to be this an atmosphere and real respect for each other. But that's all part of the culture of courage, of course, that you looked at yesterday. So it's all part of the same thing, and it means that you can have those conversations and you can give people a voice because you know that respect for each other will be solid. Now, for a leader, I'm not saying that that's easy. It can be very uncomfortable, obviously. But I think, again, this idea of needing to hear it, and this is what Brené Brown comes back to a lot in her book that I mentioned to you yesterday, Dare to Lead. Lean into that and hear it, really hear it, because you need to hear it. Because as leaders, we need to know what's going on. We need to know what people are thinking, and we need to have those uncomfortable conversations. So search them out all the time and dive in and be curious. And okay, what's that all about? Where did that come from? And don't be afraid of it. Actually see it as a wonderful opportunity to move your team forward. Now, thinking about listening skills, I have got a little diagram for you today. I don't have a wonderful piece of art for you today, I'm sorry to say, but I have got a diagram about improving listening skills. So let me just find that for you. Now, this one, it's a very simple one. Hoping it's going to come up on the screen for you. It's taking a bit of time, but when it does arrive, Now, this is actually, it's a very nice little website actually called Healthy Sandwell. And it gives, what I liked about it, it gives you a very clear framework of what it looks like, somebody who is listening and someone who is not listening. And I think this is very interesting because of the way that modern meetings are happening now. So if we look at the list of things where people are not listening, let me just make that a little bit bigger for you. I hope that everyone can see that there, okay? So if we're looking at the not listening, and imagine your modern meeting where people have maybe got their, they've maybe got their mobile phones next to them. They've maybe even switched off the cameras. And so let's think about this in this context, particularly at the moment when people are working from home. So fidgeting, doing something else, looking away or staring, interrupting, drifting in and out of the conversation, not sitting closely to the person, frowning, looking at their watch, etc., etc. Now, for me, I think when we are all together in real life, I think making the shift towards listening probably comes very naturally. But I think at the moment, this is something that I think we can really focus on and work at with our teams to try to improve that and to think about, well, how can we make sure that everyone is able to listen and that people are showing that they're listening. People might say, well, I am listening in, but obviously, showing that you're interested, paying attention, really giving your attention as someone else is speaking on a screen. It adds another dimension, but in real life as well. But I thought that was quite interesting to think of listening skills at this particular time when we're doing a lot of things online. Okay, so my final little bit to you today on this is how to prepare for particularly difficult conversations. So obviously this constant leaning in is going to help. So if you don't leave things till the point where things are very difficult, it's going to be easier. So leaning in all the time, being curious, asking, finding out what the problems are. And then if you come back to these questions that we talked about earlier in the week, so the first one is, what will the team gain from this conversation? How will it move you forward? And the second question is, if you don't do it, what will you lose? And as I mentioned before, I think the second question is probably the more important one. I think the first point, and this is something that definitely comes from coaching in particular, is truly putting yourself in the shoes of the person you are about to speak to or you are preparing to speak to. What do they want out of the conversation and what do they need? Now, those two things may well be different, and you may well think one thing and they may well think something else. So try to put yourself in their shoes truly and to find out what would be a good outcome for them in this situation. Obviously you already have thought about what's going to be a good result for you. And within that, prepare the result, prepare the outcome in its best possible form. Now, obviously, sometimes this can be extremely difficult. I recently worked with a client who had to deliver some bad news. He had to make a few members of his team redundant. Now, this was really difficult because he had to follow a script from the HR department. He was not allowed to add in anything else. He had his boss there. The HR boss was there as well. There was no room for flexibility. And he knew that the person that he was making redundant was in a very difficult position, that they were very close. They'd worked together for a very long time. And he knew that this person would find it a terrible, terrible blow. It was also just before Christmas. It was just the worst possible timing. So we worked on this. And of course, as I said to him, we can't, yes, it's such a difficult conversation. We can't make it an easy conversation, clearly. But what we can do is think about what would be the best possible outcome for the person who's in front of you. What could be the best possible outcome of this conversation? You're not going to change the message, unfortunately. But how could you perhaps give him something that would help just a little bit, or the most that you could. And he said to me he wanted that person to feel that he wasn't alone, and that he had empathy for him and the situation. So we looked at the options, and he came up with the solution that he would try to rewrite some of the script and take it back to the HR department and see if they would agree to that, so that he could add in a little bit of a personal message to see what they would allow. So that's what he did. So he rewrote it, just a small part of it, and he took it back, and they did actually agree. He did the meeting. It was very, very difficult, and it wasn't easy. But he said he felt that he had done as much as he could, and he felt that that was out of a terrible situation, it was the best outcome that he could do. So I think within that as well, sorry, I missed out a part where we talked a lot about doing a visualization of that meeting. How could we visualize that going in the best possible way? And he worked on that, and I think those two things can really help in those very difficult situations. A final point about all of that is that whoever you're talking to, whether it's a client, whether it's a member of staff, whoever it is, building rapport with that person is obviously key. And what do I mean by that? Well, in a nutshell, it's talking their language. So talking their language, really tuning in to their way of communicating, their way of speaking, even the language they use, but tuning into them. Speak their language, not your language. Speak their language. Now, as many of you know, especially those who are working in medicine and in education, you will already be doing this naturally all the time, because whenever you're speaking to lots of different types of people, you're very used to changing the way that you communicate to make sure that you are connecting with that other person. So that is really my final point that I'd like to make on that. So what your homework is, I would like you to choose 3 actions that we've discussed today. So anything about what you could do in terms of thinking about systems, about using your listening skills in a different way, thinking about the listening circles idea, how to prepare for difficult conversations. There's quite a lot of different things in there. So choose 3 actions that we've discussed, and maybe think about how you could use those perhaps for the first time, or perhaps use them a little bit more, or maybe in a new situation. So try to think how you could apply that to your situation. So that's what I would like you to do for your homework. Now, I would firstly like to say thank you so much for your time so far this week. It has been an absolute privilege to work with all of you and to have this moment with you. And I hope that you have enjoyed it as well. And I hope that you're feeling much more courageous in your leadership, and that you're ready to really go out there and to try some of these things, and to take that next step wherever you are, to take that next step into courageous leadership. So my aim with these workshops is that every single person feels that they've had value from it. And thank you for investing the time this week with me. I do appreciate that you're giving up your precious evening. So thank you. So we will tie up the ends tomorrow. But firstly, I'd just like to say congratulations on what you have done so far. Now, for those who would like a little bit of extra support, who would like an extra accountability to help you move further on with this, I have an invitation for you to hear a little bit more about how you can work with me, particularly in our new Love to Lead program. We started in January, and the second cohort are starting in February. Now, I don't want to take up your valuable time, so if you don't need that, feel free to bail out. And it's not at all obligatory to stay and listen, but if you would like to have some more information or you'd like to hear more about it, then feel free to stay on the call, and I will just very quickly just outline a little bit about that. So there are two ways that you can work with me. So firstly, in a one-to-one capacity. So I have a 6-month program, a one-to-one coaching program, where you can have as much coaching as you want. Basically, you can have a coaching session every week if you want, and you also have access to me all the time. Well, Monday to Friday, access to me using it's like a WhatsApp system, but it's called something else, a different kind of app. So that's the one-to-one program. And then the group program, I call it a group program, but actually it's a mix. So there are group sessions, group coaching sessions every week, and there are individual sessions every month. So you get the benefit of having both of those. And the idea is that this gives you really a unique way of moving forward, because the individual sessions are amazing. Those we work on taking away those limiting thoughts and beliefs that people have, expanding your goals to a realm where you probably have never even imagined, because we don't, until somebody points out that actually we can think much, much bigger. And also thinking about actual action, real action. And it is this accountability that really makes the difference. And that's why it's not like a course. When you go on a course, well, it's up to you what you do with it. But with coaching, it's still up to you what you do, but you make a contract. So every week you have new things to work on. And every week during the group coaching calls, we look at, okay, how did that go? What did you do? What are you going to do next time? And then we look at a theme. So there are 6 strands, and it's very much based around the things that you would expect. So things like goals, mission, purpose, mindset, communication, how to have a great impact, how to influence your well-being and the well-being of your team, and so on. So there are 6 strands, and over a block of 6 weeks, we look at one thing each week. The program is for 9 months, and so over a period of 9 months, you have 30 weeks of group sessions and 11 individual sessions of coaching, plus on-tap support, again with the same app. So you can always send a message, and I will reply as soon as I can. So what makes it different is that you get this personal support, a personal coaching all the way. You get accountability, and you also get a community of other like-minded dynamic leaders to help you along the way. And I think it's that mix, because I have worked on sort of short coaching programs for a coaching company, and it's very interesting. You do 6 weeks and you do a block, and so somebody has coaching for 6 weeks and they do make progress. It is good, it is efficient, but you don't get the same transformation, because you solve a problem that is there in the moment, but you don't necessarily get that big transformation that people want and that people are looking for and that they need at this particular time when they're senior leaders or executives and they're looking to take a next big step. They're transitioning in some way. They've had a problem maybe for some time that they want to resolve that needs more than just putting a few things in place. And so this is where, if you're looking for a transformation, this is where the long programs really come in. So those are the two main ways that you can work with me, and I would love to just say to you, if you are interested in having more information, then please do make an appointment with me, and we can look at really to see whether this is going to be a good fit for you. And it has to be a right fit, and I will be very honest with you, and because it needs to be absolutely perfect for you. It needs to be the right time. You need to be in the right place. You need to have time as well to a certain extent. Well, time, energy, I would say. Those of you who know how I think about time and energy, you need to have some energy to invest in the process as well. So it's not for everybody. It requires an investment in yourself. and that's the starting point. And but it is an amazing transformation to be part of, and I feel that it's the sky really is the limit when people start to look at their boundaries that they've had, and then suddenly they open the door and realize what they can do. And yeah, it's great. I love being part of the journey and seeing that transformation. Okay, so if you are interested, the next step is to talk to me, and also look at the sales page on my website. There you can find more information. But I think the best thing is to chat to me about what you want, about the next steps that you need right now. And the next group are starting in 2 weeks' time. So the sign-ups are happening from today until next Tuesday night for that cohort. If that doesn't suit you, there will be further cohorts in the year. They start every kind of 8 weeks, every 7 or 8 weeks, a new group can start. Okay, so we're going to just say goodbye to Facebook and then continue our discussion. We just have a few more minutes, and I would just like to ask you about what we've just talked about. So I'm just going to say goodbye to Facebook. Goodbye, Facebook.